This is a video lesson about chapter 3, starting from page 52 in your course book. On page 52, you can see a scheme where you had to write down who discovered which part of the world. So a kind of summary of the part that came before. So in 1492, the explorer Columbus, he discovers America, specifically the Caribbean, and he does this for Spain. He is Italian himself, but Spain pays his voyage. 1488, Diaz, he sails to Cape of Good Hope, the most southern point of Africa, and he does this for Portugal. Vasco da Gama goes a bit further and he goes around Africa to India. So he finds a new route, an alternative for the Eurasian routes. He does this for Portugal as well. Then in 1500, it's Cabral and he discovers Brazil. And he does this for Spain. 1513, Balbao. He crosses the isthmus in Panama and he sees the Pacific Ocean for the first time. This is a Spanish explorer. Then in 1522, Magallanes, he sails around the world. He dies before he arrives, but he is the explorer who is responsible for this, and he is Spanish. Then the next part is a source about the name for the new continent, America. And there you could read that it isn't named after the person who discovered it, Columbus, or Leif Erikson would be better. But it's named after Amerigo Vespucci, and that's actually a mistake. So there is a letter sent telling someone about the discovery of America, and this name is mentioned and falsely used to name the new continent. Then a few cartoons. These two cartoons, well, if you have difficulties explaining cartoons, always try to explain what you see first. So if you look at both cartoons, you see Vikings, or well, they represent Vikings, and in the second one it is even mentioned life was here 1000 AD, so that must be Leif Erikson. So it's about the discovery of America by Leif Erikson, and we always talk about the discovery of America by Columbus, but that's a mistake actually, because Leif Erikson, the Viking raider, was there first. And then the second one is about Columbus Day. It's a holiday in America where they celebrate the arrival of Columbus. And of course, here's to Amerigo Vespucci. That's about the last source that we've read about the fact that Amerigo Vespucci gave his name to the new continent, but actually it was Columbus, or better, Leif Erikson. Columbus Day, a day celebrated in America, but the indigenous population isn't a big fan of Columbus Day, of course, because it celebrates the arrival of Columbus, and for them it wasn't the start of a good period, as we will see in the next part of our course book. Battle for the colonies and the world seas. The Spanish and Portuguese will divide the world amongst them. They are in favor of mare clausum, which means closed sea, and they ask the Pope to draw a line on the map of the world. You see a dashed line in your book, and that is the papal, or the line of the papal bull. Of course, the other leading European countries, such as France, England, and the Netherlands, don't like this idea. They lost their, well, actually they are a bit late. So Spain and Portugal were leading countries in the discoveries, and the other European countries, they decide to go exploring too late, actually. And And they are in favor of the mare liberum principle. They want an open sea, of course, which is better for their trade. But Spain and Portugal want a return on investment, as you could say, by exploring or by using their explorations for their own trade. There are two other treaty lines, as you can see on this map. First, the Treaty of Tordesillas, which you can see in purple on your map. But of course, when you divide the world in two, it's a globe. That's not really, well, it doesn't work out. So there comes a second line, the green one, the Treaty of Saragossa. Between the purple and the green line is the Portuguese part, and then next to them, that's the Spanish, or those are the Spanish colonies, as we will see on this map. So here you see the Portuguese colonies, and here you see the colonies belonging to Spain. And if we put them next to each other, then we see that Portugal is more focused on maritime trade. They use the sea for trading and transport using the sea, and they have trade posts, harbors. So they focus more on maritime trade. Spain, on the contrary, is more territorial. They focus on territory, maximizing their territory, getting more land. And if we look at their or the trades that they the goods that they trade, then we see that Portugal trades a lot of slaves, ivory, spices, gems. Slaves and ivory come from Africa, of course. Spices and gems from the Indies. Then Spain focuses more on a new continent with gold and silver and farming products because of the bigger surface that they have to farm. The other nations start exploring as well, but they come a bit later. They start in the 17th century, and well, they flourish during the 17th and the 18th century. You can find a sum up of the colonies that they, well, the parts that they colonize in your book. Here you see a few maps. Here you see that North America around 1700 is divided among the British, French, and Spanish. There are some wars fought in North America between these nations for extra territory, of course. Here you see France, and that was supposed to, yes. So here you see how the French colonies evolved throughout the years. So you see that starting from the 17th century, they go exploring. Sometimes they lose a few due to wars, and they have some colonies in Africa as well. The Dutch colonies then, which you can see here, are situated in the Indies, but also part in Southern America and South Africa as well. That's the reason why they use Afrikaans. They're a form of Dutch. Then the British colonies, the British make a vast British Empire. This is of course in 1842, but you see that they colonized a lot of land. Also land that were areas where they still talk English today because of these colonizations. As I just said, the languages, they show us a bit more about the history of colonization. So in your book, you have to color the language in the correct area. And as you can see, there is a great spread of languages around the world. For example, Spanish, a lot of Spanish in South America. The English, as I just mentioned, also spread their language around the world. So pause here if you want to use the map to color the map in your book. Then, how do they treat the local population? And we zoom back to the Spanish. We call the Spanish people who colonize America conquistadores. They claimed all the land that they discovered, and they brutally subdue, so onderwerpen, the local population. There's a cartoon about this. Let's celebrate Columbus Day by walking into someone's house and telling them we live here now. And that's what I already explained. So Columbus Day, celebrating the arrival of Columbus. Of course, for most people, the people who already live there, it's not a day to celebrate because of what happened. There is one man named Bartolomé de las Casas, and he writes about the things that he sees in this new world. Actually, he's Spanish, and he talks about the cruelties that are done to the people there. You can read that on page 58. So there, it's interesting to underline all the cruelties in the text that were done to the people or the local population. And you complete this source card about that source. Pause here and complete the source card first before you continue listening. On page 59, you have now completed the source card. This is a primary source written by Bartolomé de las Casas. If you look at the background information under your source, you see that he wrote this in 1552. He wrote this in the Americas, so he was there as a monk, a Spanish monk, of course. So that is his background, and he is a coeval, of course. So he lived at that time. He was an eyewitness. So important to know about his background is that he is Spanish, of course. Well, what conclusion can we draw here? We have to keep in mind that he's Spanish, so that would talk against him actually, but he's very negative about what the Spanish do in the colonies. So actually, we do think that we can see this as a reliable source because he talks about his own people in a negative way. That's something, especially in that time, not an easy thing to do. So what he describes must have been true, and historical investigation also tells us the same. On page 59 below and here, you can see a few pictures or drawings that were made of these cruelties that were also described in the source itself. Here are a few others. Then the encomienda system. Make sure that you know what the system is about. So there was a plan, a system to divide duties and rights between the Spaniards and the indigenous population, people already living in the Americas. And well, they suggested, well, they work with a system of governors. So there is always a governor, a Spanish governor, who controls a certain area. The Spanish are promised, the Spanish promised to give the Indians education, protection against other tribes, and they wanted to convert them to Christianity. They want to teach them Spanish as well, and help them build better infrastructure. So, as from the Spanish point of view, they are doing a lot of things for the people there. But of course, if you think about it, educating them, converting them to Christianity, teaching them Spanish, it seems for the Spanish like something good to do to the Indians. But of course, the Indians had their own culture. They don't want to learn Spanish. They don't want to be converted. You must imagine that someone walks into your city or village one day and tells you that you should learn another language, and actually they're doing you a favor. I think you would react as the indigenous population did. I don't want to learn another language. I don't want to learn your language. It's not a right. But the Spanish sold it as we're doing you a favor. In exchange, the Indians would have to do, or they had to work in mines and in agriculture. But of course, this led to kind of slavery and a lot of brutalities. So the reality of the plan is a bit different from the plan in theory. Then comes the Valladolid debate between Bartolomé de las Casas, who we already encountered, and Sepulveda. The big question asked during this debate is, are Indians human? Do they have a soul? So the priority is deciding whether they have a soul or not, and if they have a soul, they're human. If they don't, they are not human. This seems like a very absurd question to ask in our eyes, but of course then it wasn't such a silly question to ask, because people were doubting whether certain people, volkeren, had a soul or not, if we could see them as humans or not. Of course, that's something, if we look at that today, we find this very absurd. Thank God that we find this absurd. But then it was a plausible question to ask. So just to put this in its specific time and its perspective. It's best if you just read about this on page 60 and page 61. Using that information, I want you to complete page 62 and you take a picture of this and you upload this on Smart School. So page 62 should be completed. You take a picture of this, make sure that I can read everything, and you put this in the upload zone on Smart School. To do this, you use the information that you get on page 60 and 61 about the debate. There is also some information that you can find on the previous pages. Good luck with that. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to send me a message using Smart School. I'm always standby to help you.